I'm in Los Angeles with,
Daniel Leighton.
and Daniel has Crohn's disease. And we have sort of a lot in common because we were both sick kids and we had to deal with everything that sick kids have to do. So, why don't you give a little history of your illness?
Okay. Well, I had my first surgery when I was 11 years old. And then I had 5 more, 12, 13, 14, 17, and 21.
So you had all this surgery, and most kids are out playing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you had to go back to school and deal with kids wondering what was up with you, and were you a freak, and could they catch it, and all the same things I had to deal with. So
Right.
why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then show some of the artwork that you did about having to deal with that interaction?
Okay. After my first surgery, during my first surgery, I had an ileostomy. So it meant like literally my insides were out and coming out of my body. So, and I had this giant scar, and like you said, I'd been out of school for a long time. So going back to that, it's, talking about it now, I still feel it. It was, I did feel like a freak. I did feel very vulnerable, especially with the exposed stomach like that, or intestines. So, there was a lot of...
Wait, so this is different than having the bag. This is like your intestines are actually out.
That's what a bag is. So you have a bag, but you have like an inch or so of your intestine, or half an inch sticking out.
Oh, I always thought the bag went in. I didn't realize the intestines were...
There are some that do that.
Okay.
But for the most part, when you hear about ostomies in some way, that's more of an internal pouch. Yeah.
The more you know.
Yeah.
Okay, back to school.
Okay. So I'm at school. I felt like a freak, and I have my intestines sticking out a little bit, so I feel very vulnerable. And when I had my first surgery, it was extraordinarily traumatic to just see my body that way. I felt like very vulnerable and like an outsider.
So how did you deal with the kids? How did you make them realize that this was just a thing that could happen to anybody?
Well, I don't know that I was able to make... some people just knew. I had like close friends, so they were good. And then I had some, other people. I just hid a lot of it for certain people. Certain people knew things and some guy asked me if I had half an ass or something like that.
Did you tell him he was half an ass?
I should have.
So why don't we look at this painting?
Okay, yeah, so this is one of the paintings. It's called Shame. And this is when I first got back to school. There's an open wound. The sun is... No one's really looking at me in just a calm, present way. One of the characters is looking away. And
so did you start doing artwork about this illness when you were a kid, or did this all come later?
It all came later. Like this piece here is one of my first pieces that I did that I felt really represented what I was doing, which was kind of like taking back, like opening myself up instead of... Because when I was 11 and I had to have that first surgery, I wasn't, I didn't really have a choice. It was basically... I think my choice would have been to wither away and die, essentially. So this was me making a choice to open myself up, show
Which
what
is
I was
like a
really
perfect
feeling.
explanation of this painting.
Mm.
You're totally opened up here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing I like about it is that the gold that's in the center there is like the beauty, the treasure that we all hold within. And that, that's the positive side of my illness, is that it gave me a gateway into that.
Again, I'm always amazed when people talk about sort of any positivity about something that seems to someone who doesn't have it is so gut-wrenching.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like even that, it's not like I'm glad I had the illness. but I am glad with about who I am, and that's part of probably what made me who I am. But I would have loved to have gotten there without all the pain and suffering.
Yeah.
But you adapt.
So let's talk about how you're using art as a storytelling means to let other people know. So you did a show at USC for me, and somebody brought their child in because the child had not met an adult with Crohn's, and she was really happy to have brought her daughter to meet you. So why don't you talk about how you use your art to tell your story now?
Well, it's sort of like when all that stuff happened, I think I was so traumatized and I didn't have a place to put it. It's almost like my body forced me to, honestly. There's a piece and it has like the throat. There's like, it's called Voices in My Throat, and the throat has figures in it that are kind of clenching the throat in a way. And that was actually what I was feeling at the time that I declared that I was going to be an artist. By doing it, it's sort of like the way that I understand what I'm going through.
So I know when I was a kid and I was in the hospital, people would look at us and sort of like, oh, there's the cute kid in the hospital, so we got a lot of sympathy. But of course, then we grow up and we're not as cute, and we don't get as much sympathy. As someone who is now an adult, you don't have children, but do you have any advice for parents whose kids are going through this?
Well, I would say to try to be as present as possible. I'll just speak to whoever's out there. Be as present as possible as you can be with your kids, because just having a steady person there is just incredibly valuable. If you can be steady in a world that feels so uncertain to a child with an illness, that's probably the best you can do, right?
As a kid, I just found that my parents accepted whatever I felt my limits were. And as long as I could do it without feeling it was too stressful on my body, they would let me try. So they let me try to be a normal kid as much as possible. I don't know if yours were.
Yeah, actually, it was similar to that. And that's I love that they did that. Because I was obviously very sick. And I didn't think of myself as a sick kid. I didn't feel limited. I felt a lot of obstacles, but I didn't interpret them as stopping me from really doing what I wanted to do. Generally, I thought of myself, and still do, as a normal person. A normal person well, actually, I don't know if I'd say I'm normal. I don't necessarily want to be normal.
You're normal for an artist.
Yeah, normal for an artist. There you go.
All right. Well, thank you for showing us the work and talking to us, and maybe some advice for kids and parents out there going through a lot of the same trauma.
Yeah.
Thanks.